When it comes to succeeding in game, it's not so much about how much value you have, it's about how much value you can show. But in the real world, how do you show value without being braggy, needy, or tryhard? In this video, I'm going to teach you one of the oldest and most misunderstood concepts in all of game, and it's a way to show a ton of value super smoothly. It's called a DHV, or demonstration of higher value. Let's talk about that right now. So what is a DHV? Well, DHV stands for demonstration of higher value, and that word demonstration is important because in most areas of game, it's a lot better to show something or convey something than to merely tell somebody something. See, it's very easy to lie with your words, but it's a lot harder to lie with your actions or with things that appear subtly underneath your words, with subtle frames. When most people talk about DHVs, they refer to DHV stories, i.e. a story you tell which demonstrates your value to a girl. And DHV stories are great, but they're actually not even the strongest form of DHV. The best forms of DHV are DHVs you do without ever opening your mouth. So we're going to talk about those a little bit, and then we are, of course, going to talk about DHV stories, how to tell the story of your life in a way that makes it high value. Before we can get into how to demonstrate value, we have to first understand what is value. What are these things we're trying to demonstrate? And whenever you think of value, I want you to think of cavemen. The reason for that is we haven't evolved that much since we were cavemen. We've evolved technologically, but biologically, we're pretty similar to how we were when we roamed the savannas or lived in small hunter-gatherer tribes. So when you think of what's high value, think more of that than of the modern day. So think more of being strong and resilient and able to hunt than being able to have good Excel skills and do a good PowerPoint presentation. So when you think of value, I want you to think a lot more about being strong, being able to hunt, being able to win a fight, being able to lead others, than thinking about the number in someone's bank account, what kind of car they drive, or what kind of grade they got on their college test. So specifically, what are the forms of value? Here is a very quick list for you to refer to. Value can come in the form of competence, being good at things, social proof, which means having people like you, respond to you, treat you with respect. Better yet, specific social proof. For example, women appearing to like you, you appearing to have had success with women in the past, and this is even stronger than general social proof. Then we have implied social proof. Implied social proof is when your actions convey that things have gone well for you in the past. So for example, if you are cocky, that is an implied social proof because it says that you've been cocky through your life and not been beaten up for it, i.e. you've been able to back up your cockiness. So that's a form of implied social proof. Being able to walk up to a girl with confidence is a form of implied social proof because it implies that when you've done that in the past, you've gotten a good response. Tangible success is also a form of value, i.e. having money, having a nice house, having a nice car, having a good lifestyle. Having shareable skills, i.e. things you can teach and add value through your skills, and then having good health, good genetics. Having strong muscles is a form of value. Seeming to not get sick easily is a form of value. Health and good genetics is also a form of value. For example, if it appears that you're always sick and always in a bad mood, that appears low value. If it appears that you are strong, confident, unflappable, and full of energy, that is a form of value. Now that we've talked about what are the different forms of value, let's talk about the other ways they can be conveyed other than just through your speaking. Because a lot of times, things other than talking can tell the story. For example, if your friend says something amazing about you, that's more powerful than if you said that yourself. Because you have a clear agenda to make yourself look good. He doesn't have an agenda to make you look good. And even if he did have an agenda to make you look good, the fact that he cares enough to have that agenda, or the fact that you're powerful enough or of value enough to persuade him to have that agenda, is also a form of value for yourself. Also, if you have accolades that are searchable, for example, if someone Googles you and finds out a cool fact about you, that can be more powerful than if you told them yourself. Or if they find something cool about you on your social media, that can be more powerful than if you actually tell them yourself. If they see something demonstrated in a photo rather than you telling them, that can also be powerful. And all of these can be woven in to your own personal conveyance. You can use photos along with your stories to make it more powerful. You can use a website along with your stories to make it more powerful. You can have social media to back up your stories to make them more powerful. So to the extent that you can, having your conveyance of value be multimedia and involve people other than yourself is very powerful. Also, for example, if you take a girl on a date to a restaurant and you seem to be a regular there, people seem to respond well to you, that's a demonstration of higher value that is non-verbal in nature. So those are all great if you have them. And in fact, they're more powerful than stories even. But a lot of times you're meeting a girl and she hasn't Googled you yet. She hasn't seen your website. She's just talking to you in a bar or on the street. All you have is the words coming out of your mouth. How do you make those words convey value? How do you convey value through your stories? And here you have a bit of a paradox, because on the one hand, you want to convey these attractive qualities. On the other hand, if it comes off like you're trying to convey these attractive qualities, well, now you could look needy or you could look like you have an agenda, and that neediness and agenda are actually low value traits. So usually there's two types of guys. There's the guy who tries to brag to a girl about all his accomplishments and is low value because he's bragging. Or there's the guy who is afraid to brag about his accomplishments and the girl's just not that impressed by him. But there is a third type of guy, which is the type of guy I want you to be. And that's the guy who's conveying his value, but you're conveying it subtly. Now, the keys to a good demonstration of higher value story are this. If your story is good enough without the demonstration of higher value, and the demonstration of higher value appears to be by accident, or just a necessary part of the story that you had to tell in order to make the story make sense, now it's going to work. For example, if you wanted to demonstrate higher value in the sense that you travel a lot, well, you could tell a story about a unique, funny, or interesting event that happened when you were in France, saying that you're an American, for example. And yes, that conveys the story, and yes, it's interesting, but it also tells her you went to France. If you were to tell a few other stories, not maybe back to back to back, but over the course of an hour with the girl, that also convey that you've been to Japan and South America, now all of a sudden she's getting this idea, oh, here's a world traveler. Here's a guy who travels a lot, and she's seeing that value in your life. Similarly, let's say you're telling a story about a crazy thing that happened, and in this story, it's necessary that you were dating someone who is a public figure or a celebrity of some kind, because the story wouldn't make sense without your girlfriend getting some kind of weird attention or having a stalker or something like that. Well, now that's conveyed the fact that you were dating someone famous without you being like, by the way, I dated someone famous. It was a necessary element of the story. Or let's say, for example, you drive a really nice car. You don't go up to the girl and go, hey, I drive a really nice car because I have a lot of money. Instead, maybe you tell a story about a police officer who was a dick and some funny exchange of words that happened, but part of the story is that he may have been profiling you based on the fact that your car looked like a red sports car of some kind. So again, what's the point? The point is that the things that are great seem to be conveyed by accident. One other thing you can do, which is really powerful, is convey the positives in the negative. So I mentioned earlier that when you're looking at value, you want to look at what would have been value as a caveman rather than what would have been value in modern society. Oftentimes, you can describe yourself in a way that's actually negative or frowned upon or a little controversial in modern society, but would have been very attractive in that tribal setting. And in doing that and even downplaying it or being apologetic for it, you can actually convey a lot of value. So for example, I will disqualify myself sometimes by saying I'm bad news, I travel too much, I have commitment issues, I never seem to, settle down in one place. That sounds like a bunch of red flags, but what does it actually say? It says, I get into trouble, yet it hasn't hurt me. I take risks, and that hasn't hurt me. I have an exciting lifestyle, right? But I conveyed it as a negative. I conveyed it as red flags, bad news, things that might be a problem for her, as opposed to trying to brag about it to her. See, a guy who doesn't understand female psychology or doesn't understand evolutionary psychology might think that what's attractive to a girl is being really nice and kissing her ass. And he may actually tell a story demonstrating the value of him being polite and kissing girls' asses and calling them 16 times a day. And he would be doing the exact opposite of demonstrating value. So in order to DHV, you have to convey the thing in a good way, but also the thing you're conveying must actually be a thing of value. If you don't understand what value is, you might be actually conveying anti-value or conveying low value when you in fact think that you're conveying value. So that's the theory. Let's talk about some really good examples of DHVs that I've seen over the years. One of the earliest great examples of DHV was actually a stroke of genius from one of my early game mentors before social media really existed. What he would do when he was talking to girls is he would do what he called his photo routine. He would pull up a picture on his camera, or he even used to have like a picture camera, like an envelope of photos that he carried around with him to do this, but camera is better. And he would flip through and show the various things, but let me show you this thing. And then he'd like flip absent-mindedly to the next one. Oh, that's interesting too, let me tell you about that. And then he'd flip, and maybe he'd even flip to something a little bit shady or a little bit like provocative, or him with a girl, like, oops, sorry, disregard that one. but it was actually, it's that idea of conveying it in the negative, where it's like, oh, I showed that to you by accident, but really he meant to show it to her. But that idea of conveying his life through photos was really, really powerful, and again, predated social media. Now you can do the exact same thing through having a good Instagram, although with the Instagram, she would discover it later, not in your presence, potentially, as opposed to right in your presence. Technically, I suppose you could show her your Instagram and scroll through it if there was a reason to do so. Next great DHV example would be a field report I had in Las Vegas years and years ago. I'll try and keep this story short, but essentially I walked up to the girl and we had a situation where we were on guest list for this club, but I needed a girl to come with me to go into the club. And so I said, hey, do you want to come with me? We need a girl, but we're on guest list. You can skip the line. And she gave me this cocky kind of retort of, oh, so I guess you need me. I was like, actually, no, I don't. I'll go find another girl. She's like, no, wait, I'll go with you. So that willingness to walk away, that abundance, was a demonstration of higher value. Then we hung out for a while. We went to another club, and it just so happened I had a connection at that club, and I was able to walk straight in when the line was super long. And she actually looked at the line, being a hot girl, and she's like, oh, we're not going to get in. There's a lot of hot girls waiting. This is going to be a problem. I said, don't worry, I got this. We walked straight through the line, and she looked at me, she's like, who are you? You don't even live in Vegas, and you can do that? And that was a demonstration of value. So being able to access the club, the first club, and being willing to walk away, and especially being able to access that second club by just walking through, even when there were hot girls getting denied, was a huge demonstration of value. It made her think I was connected, made her think I must be somebody. Another great demonstration of higher value that I have is the fact that I speak Spanish well as a white boy, and then my story around how I speak Spanish well. So the first thing that I will do oftentimes is I will say to a girl, if I notice she speaks Spanish, I say to her in Spanish, I'll say to her, oh, it's too bad I don't speak Spanish very well, so we're not going to be able to communicate. But I'll say it in very good Spanish, right? And so instead of her thinking, oh, he doesn't speak Spanish well, she'll think, oh, he speaks Spanish very, very well, and she'll be impressed. But I didn't say, oh, look at me, I speak Spanish. I said, no, I'm really shitty at Spanish. We're not going to be able to communicate. We're not going to get along, right? So I pushed her away, but showed her a positive thing. The second layer to this occurs when they ask how I speak Spanish very well. And the story around that revolves around going on trips to Bolivia and Argentina when I was younger in order to play soccer, around the idea that I wanted to be a professional soccer player, and I was training with some youth professional teams down there. So this is a DHV about being healthy, being a good athlete, being at the top of something, being competent, and I'm able to convey all these things, not by trying to get the stories into the conversation, but by getting her to ask me the question and then have an answer. This is another powerful principle of DHVs, which is if you go out of your way to tell the story, it's less powerful than if you can provoke a question and then answer the question with a story. You see, if you go out of your way to say something, it's bragging. If she asks you the question, you can say many of the same things without them being bragging. And one final really good example of a DHV, in my online dating profiles, I have a photo that I've used occasionally with me with a bunch of bills from various countries laid out on a bed. And it's a very confusing photo as in what's going on. And so it's intriguing, it gets a response. But then oftentimes I will bait into the conversation for them to ask me what the story is around that, or to try and make up a story around that. And then when it comes down to telling them the real story is I was traveling through Asia, I'd been dealing with some clients, and I actually had I had accumulated a lot of money during the trip. And so I had to make sure that I wasn't traveling with over $10,000. So we had to distribute the money among other people in my traveling party so that we didn't have any issues going through customs. But that's a high value story, the idea that you have too much money and you have to worry about that customs issue. But again, if I went out of my way to be like, I'm so rich, I travel with money, it wouldn't work. But when they ask the question, and I'm like, honestly, I'm a little embarrassed. It's kind of a shady story. I don't know if I want to tell you. They say, no, tell me. And then I tell it to them. Now, because I didn't try to tell them the story, and then when they asked, I tried not to tell them the story, now I'm able to convey that lifestyle about traveling and about having money without it being try hard. So those are a few of my examples. Now, question for you. Should you copy my examples? The answer probably is no, because it's probably not congruent with your lifestyle. It's probably not congruent with your most valuable traits. Your most valuable traits are things you should think about. Think to yourself about what would you like a girl to know about you? What would you like a girl to brag to her friends about you and say? Think about those things and then think about the stories of your life and try and weave the two together. Try and think, what are interesting stories that convey those positive traits? And tell your stories to convey the traits instead of bragging outright. One level beyond that would be, how can you provoke that with questions? Maybe you ask her a question that if she were to ask the question back to you, you could respond with one of these stories. And now you have this interwoven tapestry of value, where you're leading the conversation in a direction, she asks you the question back, and then through no fault of your own, you had to convey this positive value-laden quality. That's how you should create your own DHV stories. One quick side note on stories, even beyond just DHV stories, the very fact that you are telling a story, the fact that you're holding the attention, the fact that you are communicating well in an interesting way, that in and of itself is a form of value too. So a DHV story actually has two DHVs, the DHV of telling the story well and the DHV of the content. And you know what? Even if all your stories don't have tons of DHV content, the fact that you're holding a crowd, the fact that you are leading the conversation is in and of itself a DHV of sorts. So that's how to convey more value in your stories and convey the best traits of yourself subtly. Go do it. See you later.